Well, it's good to be back. Last week we kind of took a mini break from this series as we had Football Sunday, but it's good to be back. I've recovered from jumping up and down on chairs, so I'm feeling good again. So I'm excited about this message. I'm excited about being able to join you again and talking about what I believe goes against all the odds. You see, we've been looking back and we've been looking at different movies and things of what we have seen and how God works. We've been looking at how we overcome in Christ and who we are and what we are made for. We can identify with facing fears head on and overcoming them. We can identify with living into what God has given in our lives, living into the call and the anointing and appointing in our own lives. And let's not forget, we're called to fly together. Mighty ducks fly together. Even when the cows are circling and the roosters are crowing, ducks fly together. And as a church, together, we can go to new heights. We can go further together through support, through love and encouragement with each other as a church. And today I want to look at and maybe explore of what God has been doing since the very beginning of time. What God has been doing since the beginning of how everything started and even how he identifies with us. I want to look at how in the broken, the rejected, the beat up, and the opposed in the world, how does Christ identify with those? And today is, I want to look at a movie. I changed the movie a few weeks ago. I had one in mind, and I talked with Josh about it, and he's like, yeah, that'd work. And as I'm writing this message, I literally got all the way done with it, and then I was like, you know what, I think there's another movie that I want to do instead. Typical Kyle, right? ADHD in the midst of everything. And so for this movie, it's actually a movie that was released in 1994. It's about some little kids, a peewee football team. It's about this football team that is, if you would just look at them, you would never guess that they're a football team. It's a movie known as The Little Giants. Has anybody ever seen this movie? The annexation of Puerto Rico. Great play that was drawn up by this little nerd kid, and it worked. This movie in 1994, I remember watching it and thinking to myself, there's no way that football team would actually beat this other team. And the story kind of goes, if you've never seen it, it's a great movie, but the story goes just like any peewee football team back in those days, you'd hold these things called tryouts. You know those days where you had to try out to make a team? And all these kids gather and you have all of the coaches standing there and they have their clipboards and they're looking and they're like, okay, number 94, okay, he can catch. He can't throw, okay, but he can catch. Okay, we could use that. And then we look over here, okay, 89, that's good. Yep, they can't really run. They can't, okay, but they can block. I can use that on my team too. And then you come over here and you're like, okay, all this kid is doing is kicking a ball. I don't know how good he is. And then you see him kick like a 50-yard field goal. You're like, we can use that, right? And it's all these tryouts. And you see all these kids. And there's one specific player. Their nickname is the Icebox. And when you hear the Icebox, you just begin to think of this big, burly, nothing will stop me type of player, right? The Icebox, if you've ever had an Icebox, they're like these big, massive things. And the Icebox is this incredible player. They're skilled. They have skills that many of these other players don't possess. But not only skills, they also possess knowledge of the game. They know how to play the game and play it well. You can tell they've grown up around football. They know how to play. They know the plays and the positions and where they need to be at certain plays and certain times. And they're tough. They're gritty. They have what it takes when it comes to a player. They're also a girl. And not just any girl. This is actually the niece of the coach hosting the tryouts. But this player, the icebox, is one you want on your team, right? But she gets cut. She gets rejected. And so, like in typical movie fashion, this girl decides, I'm going to form my own team. I don't know how that really works in Pee Wee football, but it worked in the movie, okay? And she goes on to form her own team, and she gets her dad to coach them. Her dad knows nothing about football, by the way, but her dad's like, yeah, I'll coach you. We're just going to have fun. Who cares about winning, right? I am not that guy. I'm just going to, this is Confessions of Kyle real quick. Kyle likes winning. My wife is shaking her head. That's okay, babe. Some of us like being winners. Okay? So she starts this own team. And here's what's crazy is as she's recruiting these players, she goes to extraordinary lengths to get these players on her team. She finds this one kid playing in the grocery store aisles. He becomes their leading wide receiver. How does she discover him? Well, that's easy. She sees him catching toilet paper rolls over the top of other aisles because his friend is throwing him toilet paper rolls from like 3 aisles over. You guys know what I'm saying? Like, this is like a kid's dream, right? I would love to go into Meijer, open up toilet paper, and look at my brothers and be like, you go to aisle 12. I'm in aisle 15. Let me know when you catch it, okay? And I'm just going to chuck this thing, hoping it unravels across, like, you can picture it, right? It'd be glorious. And that's how she discovers a quarterback in this wide receiver. She discovers kids who can run, right? They have no knowledge of football, but what they're good at is they are really quick and they can run really fast and they know how to avoid people. Why? Because they've been bullied their whole entire lives. So they've gotten really good at running away from people chasing them. If you watch the Super Bowl, you learned that running backs run away from people trying to tackle them. This little kid got really good at running away from people trying to tackle him and catch him. And they build this team, a team that, by all purposes, when you looked at it, by everything, there's no way this team would win a football game. But what's crazy is in this movie, you can only have one football team from your city. This city has two. The Cowboys and the Little Giants. So they have to play a game. Whoever wins goes on to be the football team from that city. Essentially what you do is you have this one team, the Cowboys. They have the shiny new uniforms. They have the state-of-the-art gear. Everything looks amazing. Brand new gear, brand new helmets, cleats, gloves, everything. And then you have the Little Giants, who one kid doesn't even know where the protective undergarment for a male goes. You also have, man, I hope I don't get in trouble sometimes. You also have kids who are literally out there with bicycle helmets instead of football helmets. You have kids that are wrapped in bubble wrap for pads. And you have these drastically different looking teams. America's team, the Cowboys, and the Giants. Misfit, rejected, cut, not good enough. They're not even giants, they're little giants. Who's going to win? I think for us, when I look at this movie and I look at this Jurassic comparison, what consistently is tearing me apart is how often God chooses to identify with the misfit. The ones who, like, their mom this little kid gets wrapped in bubble wrap, and he walks out to the field like this because he can't put his arms down because his mom has like 12 rolls of bubble wrap on this kid because he can't get hurt. He's my baby, right? You have kids who don't know where certain equipment goes. You have kids who have no idea what even a football is. But God identifies with those in the world who are misfit, are broken, who are opposed, rejected. Over and over and over, Jesus constantly is identifying with those of us who are not good enough, essentially. We've often talked about how God became man and he understands us. We talk about like God is fully God, but yet fully man. And how in the world does that really work? Great question. Next time Josh or Joe preach, they'll answer that. But God himself, good luck, Josh. God himself, Jesus himself, like let's just call it what it is, faced temptations. He faced temptations. Jesus was tempted like man. We know that. He faced rejection and pain. Jesus was rejected. He was spit upon. He was tortured, beaten, bloodied, painful. Jesus knew our emotions. He can identify with them just as like we go through them, he goes through them. Grief, let's talk about that. Jesus identifies with grief. He gets to the place where his best friend Lazarus is buried, and what's the first thing he does? He cries. He weeps. He weeps. God himself weeps in this grief. He understands emotions. Anger. This is so not in my notes, but I love this. You know the story where Jesus goes to the temple and he flips the tables over? And it says he also makes a what? A whip, right? I'm going to pause 2 seconds here. It's just so not in my notes, but I was literally studying this week and I love this. Do you know how long it takes to make a whip? He literally must have like walked in, he's like, not going to do, okay. And he goes over, make sure this is muted, Zach. And he sits, and he must be like braiding the strands together. What are the disciples thinking over in the corner? Like, dude, what's Jesus doing, man? That looks like a whip. And he's like, I'll be with you in like 2 hours. Hang on. And then he comes, and that first, like he had to try it out. I remember on a mission trip, I picked up this cattle whip because we were at this ranch. And they're like, yeah, give it a crack. Have you ever done that? That's exhilarating. Right? And he's like, this will do. And then he goes into the temple and he's like, and he's cracking the whip and he's driving people out. Jesus understands emotions, y'all. That's my type of Jesus. He gets my emotions. I think Jesus had a little bit of ADHD up in him too sometimes. I think he was exciting sometimes. But what and how he always identifies with those in the world who everybody else didn't want to. He was fully man, which means he probably understood as he looked over at certain groups, certain cliques, how they felt. And what's interesting to me is that today we're going to look at 2 passages. And they're not the full passages. I'm going to kind of pick and choose a few verses that will help talk about what we're going to talk about today. We're going to look at the genealogy, actually, of Jesus. Now, when I sent this to Josh texted me last night at like 10:30, 11. And he was like, dude, you're literally reading the whole genealogy of Jesus? And at first I was like, maybe. He's like, are you preaching for like 45 minutes, an hour? Never mind, we'll cut that. So we're going to look at the genealogy of Jesus. We're going to look at why I think the genealogy is so important in understanding Jesus. And what's crazy is that the first one we're going to look at is in Matthew and then the second one in Luke. And before we dig into it, we have to understand that these 2 authors are very, very different. Very different. Matthew is, he's a Jewish author, and he identifies and writes to the Jews. Matthew is this tax collector, so he wasn't liked, by the way. It's tax season, much like taxes in our current day. People don't like paying taxes. I don't like paying taxes. And if you do, I think you're kind of weird. I don't like paying taxes, but He was a tax collector. What they were known for was literally skimming off the top. They literally would take money for themselves. They were dishonest, essentially. They were hated, rejected. And Jesus chooses him to be one of his followers. He chooses Matthew. And so he's a tax collector, which is interesting because he's writing to the Jews as a Jewish tax collector, which means he's writing to the people he steals from. And then it gets even more interesting because his gospel forms a great connecting point between the Old Testament and the New Testament. First book in the New Testament, it's this great connecting point between the fulfillment of the prophecies in the Old Testament and Jesus. It's this incredible book that brings, I think, everything together. And a lot of times, I think sometimes we get this mindset of like, well, the Old Testament, it's old. The New Testament, oh, that's good. This though is like, this is a beautiful big book. This is a beautiful big story. Beginning Genesis 1 all the way to Revelation is this beautiful big screenplay that plays out, and you can't have one without the other. I believe that in Genesis 1 and in Genesis 3, you find things that allude to who Jesus is, and you can't understand the beauty of what Jesus has done until you understand the promises and prophecies that Jesus has fulfilled. And Matthew does that. And so as he goes on in Matthew 1, he starts to talk about, Abraham was this and blah, blah, blah. And then, so now it gets to what's the first one? I think it's 3, right? And so he comes on and he's talking about Abraham and Isaac and Jacob and Judah and all these people. And then it gets to this. Judah was the father of Perez and Zara, whose mother was Tamar. That's important. Perez was the father, and it keeps on going. Next slide. Father of Boaz, whose mother was Rahab. That's important. Boaz was the father of Obed, whose mother was Ruth. Keeps going. Father Jesse. Jesse was the father of King David. Oh, everybody loves David. He's my man. Keeps going. And David was the father of Solomon, whose mother was Bathsheba. Whew. Here's what's interesting. Matthew, a Jew, records in his genealogy, the very first thing he does, this is chapter 1, okay? He goes through the genealogy. And some of the very first things he does is he lists out David or Jesus' claim to the throne of David, essentially. He brings it all the way back. And essentially it's through his, I use the word adoptive father Joseph, okay? Adoptive father Joseph. Bloodlines and rights would be passed through the father, not mothers, okay? But Matthew here lists out the names of four women in the genealogy of Christ. Something that the Jews would not really acknowledge. But Matthew, a Jewish author, puts it in this book. Why? Especially when you start to understand who they were. Tamar, an adulteress. She sold herself as a prostitute. She made the genealogy. Ruth, she was a Gentile. We're talking about a Jewish author here. Why is a Gentile in this lineage? Rahab, a harlot, a Gentile prostitute who God took great measures to save and deliver her from her lifestyle. God took and intervened at great lengths for Rahab, a Gentile prostitute. Bathsheba, wife of Uriah, who David took after sleeping with her. She's an adulteress. These four ladies make it into the genealogy of Jesus. The presence of these women show God's grace. He can and he is able to take anyone and anything and use it for his glory. When you read the whole entire genealogy, if you just read in Matthew 1, go on and read it, you'll understand and start to discover that there are not just these females in there that had some rough past, let's just call it what it is, but it didn't stop them from glorifying God, okay? But you also have men, many men in there, that were pretty messed up as well. If we're just going to be honest with ourselves, David, everybody loves David. The little boy David fighting Goliath. He's the man. He's the man, the myth, the legend, David. David also slept with Bathsheba. And then he brought her husband home. Tried to cover up what he did. But her husband, Uriah, was a stand-up guy. He wouldn't sleep with his wife until the war was over. So then David sends him back. And where does he put him? The front lines. Why? Because I know he's going to die. And then, like the good king that David is, he'll take Bathsheba on as another wife. I'll care for her. No, bro, you're just covering up your mistake. You see, his lineage is literally riddled with people who are messed up, tore up, and jacked up from the floor up. Period. And it shows his grace, his mercy, but most of all, Jesus' line is full of redemption and restoration. Jesus' line is full of redemption and restoration. Beginning to end, Jesus is full of redemption and restoration to this world. It helps us to remember and know that Jesus, our Christ and our Messiah, identifies with sinners, just like us. He understands, he identifies with us. His own lineage is riddled with it. But yet, he comes and knows that, yes, we are sinners, but yet he loves us even more. That's the beauty of Jesus. The beauty of Jesus is he doesn't look at us and say, well, figure it out and then come to me. Get pretty, make your life look good, and then come to me. No. Jesus is sitting there saying, oh, I like the messed up. I like the dirty. I like the confused. I like the broken. I can even handle the doubt. You should just come to me. There's a drastic difference in who Jesus is than I think sometimes of who our world tries to make Jesus as. Jesus never says, get your life figured out before you come to me. He says, bring me your mess, bring me your hiccups, bring me your bruises and your blood and everything else. And I'll show you my love. I'll show you everything. And if I'm honest, if I'm just going to be honest with you, as I look at this and I understand that Jesus, his lineage and his genealogy is full of redemption and restoration, if I look at my own life, if I'm being 100% honest, if I were God, I would have given up on me a long time ago. But thank God I'm not God. Thank God that he never gives up on us. If I'm honest, 14 years ago, I would have gave up on me. If I'm honest, 14 years ago, I would have pushed me to the side and said, hopeless. If I'm honest, if I was God, there's not a chance that I would be standing here today. But thank God I'm not God. My guess is that most of us, if we're just going to be honest and call it what it is, we can probably say there's a point in my life that if I was God, I may have given up on me. But the good news is that, number one, and hear me on this truth, you are not God. And that is good news. And number two, God is a God of hope and restoration and love. And he will go to any length to bring hope, restoration, and love into your life. And as you continue to look at Jesus' genealogy, it goes on. Luke records it even. I want to talk about Luke's. And Luke's is interesting too because Luke is this Gentile doctor, and he's primarily writing to the Gentiles now. Now, just like most doctors, number one, you probably could never read his writing, okay? But number two, he was very particular and accurate with certain things. Luke is one of these guys that you probably will find the most factual information with like evidence to back it up. Cold, hard facts. Why? He's a doctor. He likes those things. He likes numbers. I don't get it, but he likes numbers. And Luke records all this stuff, right? He wants to present a clear and accurate account of the life of Christ and his claim to perfection of humanity as the Savior. His gospel is detailed, gives clear, full accounts of things that happened. And then in the gospel, Luke affirms the divinity of Jesus, but he also emphasizes his humanity. Luke emphasizes the divinity of Jesus and affirms it, but he also doesn't shy away from the humanity of Jesus in his gospel as well. In Luke 3, it goes on and it starts, and you start to see like, this is the genealogy from Jesus himself, was about 30 years old. He began his ministry. He was the son of, so it was thought. That's how it began, right? Jesus was known as the son, was known as, in some translations of, or so it was thought, right? Because remember, Mary and Joseph didn't conceive Jesus, right? Jesus was conceived by the Holy Spirit with Mary. So this was essentially adoptive daddy Joe, okay? Jesus. And goes on, Joseph was the son here, son, and it keeps on going, and then keep on going. Next one. Thank you. No, you're good. Enoch was the son of Jared. Jared was the son of Mahalalel. Was the son of Kenan. But here's what's interesting, okay? I don't know if, did we miss one or two slides maybe? I might have just disabled one that, yeah, I know. I'm sorry. But at the end of this, okay? The end of this is verse 37. At the end of this, I think we might be missing one or two, but it goes on. And at the end it says 38, the son of Enosh, the son of Seth, the son of Adam, the son of God. David and all these, but it ends. This is what I want to make sure that we understand. It ends with, it starts with Jesus, and it traces it back all the way through, essentially now Joseph's line, okay? Adoptive daddy's line, okay? Traces it all the way back. The son of Enosh, the son of Seth, the son of Adam, the son of God. Humanity, Jew or Gentile alike, you understood who Adam was. Jew or Gentile alike, you know who Adam is. And it says the Son of God. What's interesting here is this, is that the interesting part is it brings Jesus all the way back to Adam, who's called the Son of God. Now, Adam is not this divine child, right? Adam is not divine. He is not holy. He is not perfect. It's not this divine term of Son of God. Like when we talk about Jesus, and sometimes they would refer to Jesus, even Jesus himself, I am the Son of God. That's a divine term for him. But in here, it's not this divine divinity talking. It's rather a term that shows that Adam directly came from God. When God made Adam, he put the dust together, and then what did he do? He breathed his life into him. God made Adam from him, created him, and put his breath into him. Luke's gospel account of the genealogy of Jesus, it identifies that Jesus is fully man and identifies fully with all of mankind, not just the Jews anymore. In Luke's account, we understand that Jesus did not only just come to save the people, but he came to save all people. It's no longer just the Jews, it's everybody. And Luke's account does that by bringing it all the way back to the first man. Through his doctoral account, he shows that Jesus comes directly from the line that falls in the garden. Remember, God made Adam and Eve, and everything was great until the serpent tricked them into eating the fruit. Then they were banished. This is the same line that Jesus comes from. A line that was banished from the garden. A line that Adam and Eve were hanging out in the garden. They could hear the Lord walking. They could hear him talking. They could see him, like perfection of all perfection. Can you imagine being in the garden? and being banished from it. This is the same line that Jesus comes from. It's a full circle redemption and restoration taking place right before their eyes. It's a full circle redemption and restoration, but yet the people didn't see it. What's crazy is that in the garden, man betrayed God. But in the same type of garden, God brought back in unison man and God. In the garden, as Adam and Eve took the bite of the fruit, sin entered the world. Jesus is kneeling in a garden. And in that garden, he's praying for all believers. He knows what lies ahead. And he says, I get it, Dad. If there's any other way, can we do that? But if this is the only way, I'm in. I want to bring them back. And if this is it, then this is it. It's full circle redemption and restoration to God. And what's mind-blowing to me is how many people missed it back then. But even more mind-blowing is how many people miss it today. See, in this movie, The Little Giants, they couldn't see the value and worth of those that they cut out. They couldn't understand the value of these kids that they cut and pushed to the side. I wonder how often our world does the same. I wonder how often our world throws the worth, the glory, and the presence of God to the side for more appealing, shiny, and new things. It seems like every single day there's a new self-help, get-rich-quick scheme. It seems like every single day there's new things that are more shiny and appetizing than actually showing up on Sunday morning to go to church. It seems like there's more things that are more beneficial in self-help books than reading this book. We just make it look with a flashy cover, and bright colors, and, buy this book and we'll send you a free DVD. You see, I think our world has traded this for things that are just temporary and appeal to ourselves in the moment. Over and over and over again, we see this. And if we're being honest, over and over and over again, we've probably felt this. We've probably felt like we've been rejected. We've been pushed to the side. We've been beaten. We've been written off. You see, what's crazy to me, though, is that God can take a group of misfits that were unwanted, messed up, and rejected, and he can use them to teach the world a lesson. I've spoken many times, and I love the fact that Jesus took 12 young guys that were not good enough. I love the fact that he took 12 unqualified, misbanded guide of guys. Like, this is like a motley crew of misfits, right? He has tax collectors who follow him that hate each other because they compete with each other. He has guys from different backgrounds who he's like, hey, you guys should be friends now. And they're like, do you know who we are? And he's like, yeah, but do you know me? He takes 12 guys who, by the world's standards, all they should do for the rest of their life is wake up, go to work, come home, have a child with their wife, go to bed, and then repeat. That's essentially what the world tells of these 12 young guys. You're not good enough. Go and take on your father's trade. You don't have what it takes. You're not smart enough. And Jesus goes and he looks at me and says, come and follow me. He invites them in. They're not good enough, but he says, I can make you good enough. You've heard it before, like God doesn't call the equipped, but he equips the called. Like, let's just be honest, right? These 12 guys were not equipped. They were fishermen. And half the time, if you remember reading some of the stories, Peter, half the time, didn't even know what side to throw his net on. Just saying. They weren't even good at fishing sometimes. But Jesus says, I want to use you to change the world. And Jesus' bloodline proves that. Bathsheba, David, all of these people. What the world would say that nothing good can come from Nazareth, it came and it changed the face of eternity. His ways, his path, they're unlikely and unlike any other. And his disciples and others, they chose to follow him. But just like them, we have a choice. We have a choice of who we are playing for. The world always has and always will look appetizing, appealing. It'll have the new flashy lights and flashy things. It's got all the latest and greatest things to offer us, but here's the reality is our world can never offer us true hope and true life. It can offer us a false hope. It can offer us a temporary fix, but it can never, ever offer us the true hope and true life that comes from Jesus. God offers that. He offers hope. He offers redemption. He offers worth and value in every single one of our lives. But it might look a little different than what we think. It might even be broken at times. You might be broken at times in it. You might be facing things that you never thought you would. But at the end of the day, God is a God who uses it to bring glory, and his presence is always here. One of the things I'm excited for at this upcoming retreat is I've used a lot of quotes by this guy. His name is Bob Goff. Bob Goff is speaking at this conference. And I will personally tell you, I am trying to figure out a way to get dinner with him sometime. Highly doubt it's going to work, but it's worth a shot, right? Shoot for the stars. Bob Goff speaks often about these things in his books and his speaking times. And one of the things that I love about him is he was talking, I remember hearing him and listening to him one time, and he was talking about the church. The church is not made up of whole people, but rather of broken people who find wholeness in Christ who was broken for us. The church is a place where the incompetent, unfinished, and unhealthy, and even broken and rejected are welcome. Incompetent, the unfinished, the unhealthy, even the broken and rejected are welcome. I don't know about you, but sometimes I'm incompetent. Sometimes I'm definitely unfinished. I'm not put together. Sometimes I'm even unhealthy. Broken, check. Rejected. But yet we're welcome here in his presence. So hear me on this. Hear me on this. We might be sitting here this morning as we close today. I want to just speak over a few words over you of truth as we close today. Know that there is redemption and restoration. Know that there is hope. No matter what you've been through, no matter what you're going through, there is hope. And today is a good day to let the names Jesus whispers over you sink in deep. Hear these words. These are words that he has spoken over you, that he speaks over you each and every day, that he claims you, that you are holy, you are set apart, you are forgiving, you are precious, you are one that he died for, you are one that he loves so deeply. He has a plan for you. That he treasures you. You are one of his prized possessions. He calls you a masterpiece, a workmanship, beautiful and worthy. He calls you redeemed. No matter what you've walked in, no matter what you are walking in, you are redeemed. Why? Because he calls you his beloved. Let that just simple word real quick. You are his beloved. He is so deeply and passionately in love with you that he will chase you down. He will make a way to find you because he calls you beloved. And my personal favorite, he calls you his. As you stand in a lineup of people who they might be the best of the best, they might look better than us, they might even be taller and handsomer and better facial hair than some of us, or a better hairdo, but he sits there and he calls you his. He points to you and he says, that one, that's the one I want. That's the one that is mine. You are his. You are his. It gives me hope that even in the midst of whatever I might be going through, no matter what struggles, no matter what mistakes, no matter what pain and brokenness and rejection and opposition I might face, my God stands there over and over again. And he points to me. And he looks. And he says, that one. That one's mine. And so as we continue to worship today, I just want to invite you to keep your heads bowed, maybe and your eyes closed. And just take a few moments. Let those words of you are set apart, you are worthy of dying for, you are redeemed, you are restored, you are his beloved, you are his child, you are beautiful, you are worthy and valuable to him. Let those words just permeate and just soak in you. Let it spread within you from the very deepest pit in your soul all the way to the very tips of your hair. Let it just start to flow out of you that you are claimed as his. The Lamb of God, the Lion from the tribe of Judah, calls you his. He sees you as valuable. And he's willing to do whatever it takes to make a way to get you into his presence. As we continue to worship this morning, would you just claim those words in your life? Maybe one of those stuck out. Maybe you needed to hear a certain word today. And maybe I didn't audibly speak it, but I believe that my God is a God who will speak to us in each and every single one of our lives of exactly what we need in exactly the right moment. And this might be a moment for some of us where he is calling you his. And he might be calling you back into his arms, into his presence to say, my child, I will make a way. There's nothing that can overcome me. There's nothing that can prevent me from being with you and you with me. So just come home. Because I'm waiting with my arms wide open to just hold you. Because you are mine. You are mine. And this world will not take you from me.